our book 101 review.
Hmm.
I think it's this
I like.
better, right?
Well, I like this. Yeah. Like this.
Okay. I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. And today we're having a Safa Sunday.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic time zone wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is. It's so great to have you with us today. My name is Safa Burnell. I am a cyberpunk and mythpunk author, a poet, and an editor who works for a small press. So, from both sides of that creative divide, I'm here to help talk about books, and I couldn't be more excited.
Yes. Books, people. And please do listen to my latest episode. I interviewed my feature author of the month, Mr. Douglas A. Burton, award-winning author. So please do listen, people. And of course, my feature author of the month of July, Mr. Sebastian D. Castell, award-winning and best-selling author. Let's support them because if you support them, more books to come, like Miss Papa Bernal. So, Miss Bernal, before we go on, we want to shout out our top five listeners this week. Okay. Miss Bernal, can you please?
All right, shout out to Suriname for having the number 3 and number 4 spots with both books and arts genres. Shout
Yeah.
out to St. Kitts and Nevis. St. Kitts and Nevis, we have seen you before here. Thank you so much, everyone from St. Kitts and Nevis who is supporting Book 101 Review. It is so awesome to see. And shout out to Uganda. And
Yeah.
hello, everybody in Kibale. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Well, I guess it's evening. getting closer to the afternoon, into the evening there. You know, it's about, 9 hours, I think, from where we're currently recording this.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic time. Thank you so much for the support of Book 101 Review and the support of Mr. Lucas in all his podcasts. It
Yes,
means a lot.
thank you so much. You've been to Uganda, Miss Bernal.
I have not been to Uganda, but I've been to Ghana and Liberia.
Oh, wow. How
So
is it? Can you share your experiences?
yeah,
Um,
so I actually was part of a humanitarian charity for almost years.
yes.
For many years, I was a volunteer for an international medical charity, which was helping with neuroscience and neurosurgical care and education in West Africa. And also, I was also part of a school where we actually have a school in Kibale in Uganda as well. So, yeah,
Yes.
spent quite a few years of my life going back and forth from West Africa, rolling up my sleeves and seeing what I could help with in the world, which is something I encourage everybody to do, whether that is helping at home with all the things that need help in the community that you're in, or whether that's going around the world. It is definitely a worthy thing to do. So,
Yes.
shout out to
People
charity.
speaking of helping, please do support our Food 101 Book 101 Review Foundation. We are helping less fortunate children all over the world. If you have something to donate, please do donate our foundation. So, Miss Bernal, what we gonna talk about today?
We are going into a dive on something thrilling, something suspenseful, something with a lot of dynamic characters and intense pacing. We're talking thriller novels today, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think my drum roll is late.
Let's talk about The Hunt for Red October. So for those of you who were with us during Movies 101 review today, we also did a Safa Sunday where we talked about The Hunt for Red October and The Sum of All Fears. So if you'd like to hear what we had to say about the movie versions of these books, please do hit up Movies 101 review and take yourself a listen over there. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, we always connecting people. Book 101 review and movie 101 review. So please do listen. So, Miss Bernal, what defines a political thriller novel, in your opinion?
Number one, you need to have complicated politics. You have to have a world where there is an us versus them mentality between either political parties or between countries, between, conglomerates, whether it's something like NATO versus the USSR, things like that. So you need to have the political system be something where there's tension involved and where there's an us versus them. And that sense of us versus them is actually incredibly important to kind of polarize and separate groups of people to prevent them from coming together and finding, that sense of commonality that we have as human beings and as people who, even though we may disagree with certain things, we can still see each other as human beings. And with a thriller, especially a political thriller, it's important for the bad guys to continue that separation, where often you will find that the thriller is either solved by or aided by people who go, wait a minute, this person is kind of like me. And seeing themselves in the other person, that they're able to sort of work their way around. There's still conquering evil. They're still kind of setting things right, depending on the sort of the sort of political thriller you're going to. With something like The Hunt for Red October, it became incredibly important that the character of Jack Ryan figured out that Marco Ramius was trying to defect and not trying to blow the United States up with nuclear missiles. So for him to go, wait a minute, I think he's trying to defect, and puts his career on it, not only his career, but the entire safety of the eastern seaboard of the United States of America. In 1984, he's banking on this idea that Marco Ramius doesn't want to be in the USSR anymore. That takes away that us versus them, in hoping that, Marco Ramius is joining that us, is joining that sense of, hoping to join that sense of community. So you've definitely got that sense in a political thriller. Also, something like the setting, once you put something in a familiar time period that people would actually know, then you don't have to spend as much time explaining the history of the Cold War. You just go, it's the Cold War, US versus USSR, go. And either for those of us who remember those days, who lived on the tail end of the Cold War, or for those of us who study history, we're like, got it. Gotcha. I know exactly what this is. And we're able to kind of be like, okay, here we go. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get into this. For people who are like, well, what's the Cold War? What was that? Like, okay, here we go. I feel old. Okay. Open a history book here. Okay, so things were tense. Here, watch this.
Watch this movie. So how important is the element of suspense in a thriller movie? Novel.
Without suspense, everything falls flat. It's like, with Food 101 review, it's like a meal without seasoning. If I might trod the boards of, there's no marination, there's no flavor there. If things are answered too quickly, if problems are solved too fast or solved too easily, then that breaks suspense. It breaks that tension. And suspense really, it creates that constant sense of raising questions and revealing problems. And you have to withhold solution until the protagonist is ready to confront those issues, those problems. And really, with a thriller, you have to start that tension from the very first paragraph. I need to feel like the very first page of that novel, I crack it open, I immediately feel that there's tension involved. There is something going on here, and it's not a gooder. There is a problem. Hark! Someone call Hamlet. There's an issue here, So you need to start building it from the very beginning. And then as you solve one problem, that problem either needs to instigate a greater problem that you didn't expect. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, frick, there's complications. Oh no, what happens? And then, their main character has to dive deeper into another set of problems, and it just sort of caterwauls along, and it's a little bit like a boulder going down a hill. Or you solve one problem, you take a deep breath, and then you find out that it opens up, 3 different complications that you then have to deal with. Or, maybe there's a red herring in there. Maybe, something, red herring is when you have something that's not actually relevant. You thought it was relevant, and then it's like, oh, that was just a misdirection. So you need to make sure that you're pulling the problems and the solutions in such a way that there's doubt. That there's doubt that the protagonist can handle this. There's doubt that they're going to be able to do it in time. Maybe the strategy that they had all of a sudden is eliminated and it's not going to work anymore. Oh, well, that strategy was contingent on there being a van, and we don't have a van. We have bicycles. Well, what are we going to do now? And I mean, that would be a very silly kind of tension to, all of a sudden add. But just to kind of give you have to have that sense of twisting and weaving the suspense in with the tension, so that you don't necessarily let go of those readers while at the same time still giving us a chance to breathe between certain things. Because otherwise you're just yelling at people. And as much as I love Flesh God Apocalypse, shout out to the Opera, their new album that just came out yesterday, as much as I love death metal, I love Flesh God Apocalypse and other death metal bands because they have that bah kind of sound, but they also have an operatic soprano and other symphonic instruments that give that beautiful lilting music in between. And it's that mixture between the heady and the intense and the break that creates the suspension tension in the first place.
Wow, congratulations, opera.
Didn't
Speaking of
think I'd be
music,
talking about Flesh God
I want you
Apocalypse
to
today.
invite you. Please do listen to my second season of Music 101 with Mr. Mickey Smith. So please do listen for our latest episode. Oh, I forgot our latest episode, but please do listen to Music 101. Oh my goodness. So, Miss Burnell, what makes a plot twist effective in a thriller novels?
It has to matter. The plot twist has to matter to the characters or to the actual event that the thriller is kind of engaging with. So if the plot twist is just, it's a dog instead of a cat, well, it's still a pet. That doesn't really change much other than, dogs moving in different ways than a cat can climb walls. Oh no, what are you going to do? But the bomb is strapped to a cat. We thought it was strapped to a dog. It's strapped to a cat. Oh no, now they can jump. Like, it doesn't really matter in that case. But there has to be a surprise to the reader. A good plot twist is a surprise, and not necessarily one you could see coming. That's where you get some people who just kind of get a little jaded. They're like, oh, I've been reading thrillers for, however many years. And oh no, here's where it comes. The woman that he's gone out for coffee with is actually going to be an agent for the other side. There it is. Okay, there we go. Yep, I saw that coming. Ho hum. Okay, you've lost them. You've lost them. So the plot twist has to be relevant. It has to be timely, and it has to matter. And it really helps if it's not just something that's now a trope. If you can go and find a list of thriller tropes and be like, oh, so now this person is actually evil, and oh, this person's playing both sides, and oh, now this, this thing is doing this. Like, if you can find it on a trope site, then maybe you should think of something else. Dive deeper, work harder, figure out another way. And also another thing is things like plot twists and cliffhangers. They can use information that the readers have that the protagonist doesn't. And so that could be another form of plot twist. How is this protagonist going to find out this information? We know it. They don't. So how are they going to find out? Like, when is this going to happen? How is it going to happen? That can also kind of twist things, especially if this protagonist finds out in a completely different way than we would have expected. There's a major plot twist that happens in Book of Revels. And it was really fun to kind of hint along the way and to have the readers find out, even in Son of Abel, what was actually going on with Caleb Malthusson and why all these things were so, huge, why people were being so tense around it. And then you finally have that moment where Caleb discovers this in Book of Revels. And I always wanted it to be the kind of tension and the kind of plot twist that completely shakes Caleb Malthusson. But at the same time, we've been waiting to find out when he's going to figure it out. So hopefully that tension is there, not because of what the information actually is, but for how it affects the protagonist or the antagonist that's dealing with it. So it just kind of makes things a little bit interesting. How information is given, when information is given, can oftentimes make or break a thriller. You can have the same storyline with the same amount of information, but depending on whether you're telling a story in a linear fashion, depending on when you're releasing information or when you're holding it back from either the readers or the characters themselves, that can make or break how the novel is actually, received.
So, Miss Bernal, speaking of your books, when will the Ginungagap will come out?
A little Griffin is telling me that we are looking at a December release for Ginungagap, which will conclude the Judge of Mystics quartet. That will be the final book of that quartet. There will be other books in the Judge of Mystics universe, like Psychopomp and Agape Maki. But as for Caleb Matheson's part of this saga, of this story, Ginungagap kind of gives him a break. Then we get to move on to some of the other characters, like Tuya and like Ares and Aphrodite. So, yeah, it should be completely concluded by December, so the holiday season. So keep up looking for that. It's going to be a fantastic time. Looking
Yes.
forward to it. Da, 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 da.
Looking forward for that.
Cannot wait to see what
Conclusion.
everyone thinks.
How about for your beta readers? Did they have
Oh,
conclusion? Conclude. I therefore conclude.
it is so fun to me when I give a book to my editor and then my beta readers, because I have an editor and I have beta readers. Shout out to Vreda Literary for that, and shout out to my fellow podcast co-hosts, Emily Armstrong and Kess Bischoff, who are part of the We Aren't Dead Yet podcast, which we do every Thursday. We release an episode. If you're into video games, tabletop games, science fiction and fantasy books, and just a lot of really nerd culture stuff, then you'll absolutely love We Aren't Dead Yet.
Nerd,
Shout
yes.
out to them, who they are my two main beta readers because I trust them with my literary life. And it is so fun to just watch. And sometimes, when I know they're reading, and, we'll use something like Google Docs or some, there's a couple of programs where you can kind of have somebody leave comments. And every once in a while, I'll get the notifications of a comment as they're writing it on my phone or something else. I'll be like, and it's just comment in real time, and to see the like, like, how dare you? It's like, yes,
So
yes, I got it.
can we invite them, Miss Bernal? Can we invite them one of these
Absolutely.
days to be our guest on Book
I'm
One
sure
One
they'd love
Review?
it.
And let's talk
Yeah.
about your nerdiness on Book 101.
Massive nerd.
Massive nerd. Let's invite
Oh,
them. Oh,
I play lots of video games in my spare time, but
yes.
yeah.
Next week, can we invite them?
I will. I'll give them a shout out and let them know they are actually 3 hours ahead. They're on the eastern seaboard of the North
Oh,
American
okay.
continent. So, asking them to, I'll make sure to see if they can pry themselves out of.
Yes. Let's
Okay.
see. So, what makes a plot twist effective in a political thriller novel?
You have to not see it coming. That's number one. You shouldn't see it a mile away. If you can see, oh, look, there's a plot twist on the side of the road, if you can see it that far away, you're like, oh, look, I'm on chapter 3. By chapter 7, there's going to be this plot twist. If you can see that far away, go back, do it again. Come on. Another thing is it needs to be relevant. It needs to be relevant to either the characters or the situation. Either it is morphing a problem that the characters are trying to solve, or it is introducing a new problem that the characters are trying to solve, whether that is an upping of the stakes, or whether that is a change of alliances, or whether that is new information which makes them rethink what they're doing with their lives. you know, you've got to have something like that in a plot twist. If the plot twist is just there to be there, people can sense it. And then it's like, oh, yeah, okay. So that character we found in one scene that was slightly dubious and kind of going around with shifty eyes and a weird hat was actually a spy. Oh, and you know that is oftentimes the killer with that kind of thing. Like when I'm editing a novel which has plot twists and cliffhangers as part of it, and I can kind of see it coming that far ahead. I don't know. As an editor, I'm fairly jaded. I do ask quite a bit out of um, out of the people that end up having me as their editor, especially in the small press. And so shout out to Madhurika Sankar and her upcoming book. It's being released November 19th of this year, Dustria. It is a work of fantasy. Madhurika Sankar is an Indian author, and she's just fantastic with kind of weaving politics into her fantasy narrative. And so we've been working quite hard on those last little tweaks of some of the twists and how information actually ends up getting in the reader's eyes. And it just reminds me so much of, you can have these dubious expectations. You can have a character who presents as a certain kind of, whether it's trope or a certain kind of person, like, oh, here's the overbearing mother of a prince who wants her son to end up being the king of everyone, and you have this, okay, here she is, she's overbearing, she says she's that. Oh my gosh, what just happened? And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like, hold on a minute, did what? You can kind of build that way to see what's going on and see what's happening. And that's how you kind of make it a successful twist. And you can also make it something that we didn't expect all of a sudden a relationship between two characters to change. Especially if you're in the middle of something and all of a sudden something happens character-wise. Well, what does that mean now? And I know for myself, one, if I might be frivolous, one series that I'm just waiting for plot twists and cliffhangers, like everything's a freaking cliffhanger when it comes to this, is the manga Spy X Family. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's 1960s alternate universe sort of, it's basically Cold War between two countries, and you've got a spy who ends up adopting a telepathic child and finds an assassin to be the mom so that they can pretend to be a good family so he can infiltrate a school and meet a political leader. And so the spy doesn't know that the child is a telepath, and he doesn't know that the assassin that he married in order to be mom is an assassin. He just thinks that she works at City Hall. And so you have, Lloyd and you have Yor as the parents, and they both don't know that each other has these salacious lives. But the little girl does. And so you're able to have this really cool working of tension because the little girl as a telepath is like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And yet you're still constantly going, when are they going to figure it out? What's going to happen? At some point, I know that they're actually going to be confronted by this. And so it's this little, like, in a fun way. I mean, Spy X Family is just a sort of really well done. And it's also, there's season 1 on Netflix if you want to see the anime. And it's a really done, cute show. Like my spouse and I have been watching it just to kind of decompress. And it's just really cute and funny and fun. But at the same time, it also has a lot of really sincere stuff about war and about why war should be prevented. Which is just like, whoa, all of a sudden they'll have a scene where you're like, oh my goodness, now I'm emotionally involved. So really good if you just want something kind of fun. But at the same time, that's sort of a silly way to show that tension can build over time. You can have that, like, when are they going to figure it out? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What are they going to do about it? Like, oh my gosh, please fall in love enough that you don't end up killing each other. Like, that's just a fun way of doing it. But you can have those moments too where, the readers know before the characters do. In that case, though, you just have to make sure that it's not artificially inflated to a point where by the time the character figures it out, you're like, okay, finally, you can push tension too far. So
Yes.
hint,
Yes,
hint,
yes,
Spy X
yes.
Family.
Yes. What's your favorite anime, Miss Bernal?
Oh, okay. So I've got a couple. Number one, Ghost in the Shell. I'm talking classic Ghost in the Shell.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Number two is a rare anime. You can't really find it anywhere now. Like it's not, it was a Bandai created anime called Saber Marionette J. And this is
Oh,
from back in
wow.
the 90s to early thousands. And Saber Marionette J was goofy and fun, but again, it had that tension between various factions on a planet, one of whom was more warlike, and the other one was more, wanting to be peaceful and things like that. And you have just this every guy who ends up finding these android women that were slowly developing in their artificial intelligence to the point where they were becoming more and more emotional and more real. And just how all of that was working with trying to, fend off attacks from another country, from another area of the planet. And there's a lot of that sort of tension going in there. While at the same time, it was really goofy and really fun to offset some of the very deeply emotive sections with the character of Tiger, who was my favorite. I loved Tiger, Tiger in the, you know, obviously the Japanese language version. But that was a lot of fun. Spike's Family's good. I also, Assassination Classroom. That was another one I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoyed. But my all-time favorite, I think, the one that I go back to the most is Mushishi.
Mm.
And Mushishi is
Japanese.
about Ginko, you know, he's a Mushishi, he's going up against all these little kind of mystical critters and things like that are causing sort of diseases and differences and things that are happening in a sort of feudal Japan kind of fantasy era. And he's looking at these creatures not as scourges to be killed, but to try and understand them as creatures so he can see, how to resolve things in a better way. And I love Mushishi. It's more lo-fi, it's more calming and things like that. And it's also very unsettling in places, a little tiny bit closer to horror when it comes to certain machines that they see. But yeah, I love it. Absolutely love
Yes.
it.
Yes, people. We love books. We love anime. We love movies.
Mhm.
We love everything. We love food.
Oh,
Speaking of food,
love food.
I want to please do purchase one of my Food 101 merchandise. People name it, and we have it. A coffee mug, accessory pouch, apron, of course, and a lot more. This is my products of Food 101 on our fourth season with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. So please do purchase them. Available on Etsy and Shopify. So Miss Bernal, to sum up what we're talking about, what role does the theme of danger play in the most thrillers?
It's part of the stakes. It's a part of the twists and the suspense and the tension. If you don't have a sense of danger involved, you're missing out on really any feeling that there's danger, that there's stake, that there's something that could go wrong. We were talking about this in Movie 101 review as well, but there's been a few movies out where I haven't felt, and I'm not going to name them because, I don't want to, kind of just because I didn't like something doesn't mean that other people wouldn't. But uh, where the protagonists were so powerful, there was no danger. There was no, expectation of potential harm. There was no sense that, oh my gosh, this could go wrong. And they're so powerful. You're like, yeah, well, you're just going to, seep up the energy of a sun or change the universe itself or whatever it is. All of a sudden that tension's gone and I'm not going to worry about you. It's like Superman going into a bank robbery. I'm not worried about Superman. I'm worried about the father with his wife and child who are terrified, who thinks that maybe he can rush the guy. Like, I'm worried about that guy because there is a sense of danger. There's a sense that he could get hurt. And without that sense of danger, like if that person is so good at what they do that you're like, oh, well, they're going to get out of it anyway. For me, it's the difference between early James Bond, where things are a little bit more campy, and seeing Daniel Craig actually go through, quite a visceral scene in Casino Royale. And all of a
Yes.
sudden you're like, oh, this isn't, Roger Moore. This is a different James Bond. And love or hate what Daniel Craig's run as James Bond was. I personally really liked Daniel Craig's run as James Bond. I quite liked those movies. And of course, Skyfall was the cinematographer on Skyfall was Roger Deakins. So, a shout out to just the amazing cinematography in that movie. My favorite cinematographer in the world. But the second you realized James Bond can get hurt, holy crow. All of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, the stakes are higher. Okay, here we go. They're not perfect. They're not going to have like, oh yes, well, you just didn't realize that my tie is actually a flotation device. All these things. Like all of a sudden you're either limiting resources or you're limiting the ability for somebody to withstand either pain or pressure. The second you've kind of limited those resources to a point, you can go too far with it and then it's not fun anymore. But within reason, when you limit those resources, that's where the tension comes from. And that's where people are all of a sudden like, oh no, I got to read another chapter. What's going to happen? Oh no, the chapter ended. Okay, no. Sorry, mom. I just need to give me 5 minutes. Like, oh, you're flipping pages and you're going and you're going, you're going. You're trying to finish the book. You're trying to get to the end. You're trying to see whether or not this person's going to be okay. So in order for that to work, though, you have to actually like the protagonist, or at least somebody in the novel. You have to emotionally attach as a reader to somebody who's important to the plot. And here's another thing that it's been really interesting over the past few years, I'd say over the past decade. There's a lot of novels, in my opinion, being shipped out, and kind of trying to find their place in the landscape. And of course, there's a place for every kind of story in the world. That's the way the world works. There's no one audience. There's an audience of billions of people. So there's billions of minds and billions of kind of stories that people could possibly desire. But there's this sense that in order to make a character quote unquote real, you have to make them not as necessarily likable. Oh, but that's just them. They have these things. This is them. You have to accept them as they are. And I mean, yes, we do have to accept people as they are in this world. And, we want to be coexistent and we want to see people where they're at so that we can kind of create a community on this planet, because that's what I believe will help save it. But when your main characters are just kind of jerks, they're just sort of bad, you're not going to feel bad for whatever happens to them. So you have to feel that they're a little bit vulnerable and that you can like them, at least a little, in order to buy in to whatever it is that they are eventually going to do. And that's the trick, I think.
Yeah, that will be the trick, people. A political thriller novel delves into a murky world of politics where power, deception, and intrigue take a center stage. So, Miss Bernal, can you plug in all your books before we go? Agape Maki.
As I've said, my name is Safa Burnell. My website is SAPHABURNELL or safaburnell.com. You can find out more information on Usurper Kings, Charanash, Son of Abel, Whiskey and Sinner's Blood, Book of Rebels, Neon Lieben, Cagewire, and the Cottonmouth Smile. On my website, you can also find my books anywhere that books are sold. If you like cyberpunk, if you like mythpunk, if you like a mixture of dynamic emotional characters and action, then you will likely like my books. And if you're like, action isn't for me, my poetry collection, Usurper Kings, is fantastic. And it's in its 7th printing, which I'm really proud of. Its 10th anniversary edition has already come out, and I'm very excited by that. So I hope you find my books on digital or print and upcoming audiobook everywhere they are sold or at your local public library.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Safa Bernal, because if you support her, as I said, more books to come. So, Miss Bernal, thank you for your time.
And thank you for yours. Have a fantastic week.
Bodycam people, see you soon.
Gotta love music.